Before dawn touched the sky, Maya was woken by a loud, unexpected knock on her small apartment door. Still in her faded scrubs from the night shift, she opened it carefully only to freeze as a tall man in a sharp suit stood before her, flanked by two security guards and a sleek black car waiting behind them. His presence didn't match her quiet, struggling world. He spoke her name with unsettling certainty, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "You cared for the woman everyone else ignored," he said, meeting her confused eyes. "And today, it's my turn to care for you." Maya's heart raced, her breath stalled, and before she could respond, the man reached into his coat and handed her an envelope sealed with a gold crest, a symbol far beyond anything she had ever come close to in her life. She didn't know him. She didn't know how he knew her, and she couldn't understand why a billionaire would show up at the door of a broke nurse who barely earned enough to survive. But the story behind that knock had begun long before this. Morning in quiet corners of the city where no cameras watched and no applause waited back when, Maya was only trying to offer small kindness to someone everyone else walked past. Every day for months, Maya dragged her tired body through double shifts, living off instant noodles and borrowed hope, but she always stopped by the worn-out bench near the hospital entrance where a sick, homeless woman named Helen sat wrapped in tattered blankets. The world saw Helen as an inconvenience, a shadow, something to avoid, but Maya saw her as a human being who needed warmth more than judgment. She brought her leftover meals, clean bandages, a flask of warm tea, and sometimes even her own scarf when the winter wind grew too cruel. No one praised her for it. In fact, some co-workers warned her she was doing too much, but Maya had grown used to surviving on little rest, little money. Little comfort hand giving wasn't something she measured by what she had left. Unknown to her, each tiny act of compassion was building a bridge toward a moment she could never imagine. A billionaire learning her name, searching for her door, and appearing one morning to repay a debt she never knew she created. This is how an ordinary nurse, with nothing but kindness to offer, found herself at the center of a story where a simple choice to care would change every part of her life. The knocking wouldn't stop. At you first. But Maya thought it was part of a dream, a sound echoing from some distant hallway in the hospital where she'd spent most of the night. But as she forced her heavy eyes open, the dull pounding on her apartment door grew louder, more urgent. Her tiny room was still dark, lit only by the orange glow of a street lamp sneaking through the curtains. She glanced at the time on a cracked phone screen. 6:12 a.m. She hadn't even slept 2 full hours. With a quiet groan, she swung her legs off the old mattress, the cold of the floor biting her bare feet. Still wearing her faded hospital scrubs, she stumbled to the door, brushing messy hair out of her face. Nobody ever visited her this early. In fact, hardly anyone visited her at all. For a second, she hesitated. What if it was the landlord again, asking about the rent increase she couldn't afford? Or a neighbor, complaining about something that wasn't her fault? She took a breath, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. Then she froze. Standing in the narrow hallway was a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, the kind she'd only ever seen in magazines. Behind him, a sleek black car idled by the sidewalk, and two serious-looking security guards stood like statues. This didn't fit her world of bargain groceries and unpaid bills. The man's eyes were calm but intense as he looked at her like he had been searching for her for a long time. "Are you Maya Rahman?" he asked. Hearing her name in the mouth of a stranger like that made her pulse jump. "Yes," she answered slowly. "Who are you?" The man didn't introduce himself right away. Instead, he said something that made the air around her feel heavier. "You cared for the woman everyone else ignored," he began softly, "and today, it's my turn to care for you." Maya blinked, her tired brain struggling to understand. Images flashed in her mind: Helen on the bench, wrapped in threadbare blankets, the hospital entrance, late-night cups of tea shared in the freezing air. "Helen," Maya whispered, suddenly more awake. "Is this about her? Is she okay?" The man's expression held a kind of sadness and gratitude mixed together. "May I come in?" he asked. She glanced around her tiny apartment, embarrassed by the peeling paint, the stack of unpaid bills on the table, the sink with 2 unwashed mugs. It wasn't the kind of place you welcomed a man like him into, but curiosity and worry overpowered her pride. She stepped aside. "It's small," she murmured. "But yes, come in." He entered carefully. As if not wanting to disturb anything, the guards remained outside. Maya shut the door, her heart pounding in her ears. "I should introduce myself," he said finally. "My name is Richard Hawley." The name sounded familiar, like something she'd heard in the background of news reports playing in the hospital lobby. Company mergers, donations, billionaire philanthropy, all things far from her life. I know you're confused, he continued, reaching into his coat to pull out an envelope sealed with a gold crest. But the kindness you showed to a woman with nothing has led me here. To you? Maya stared at the envelope, then at him. This moment, this morning, this man at her door, it all felt impossible. She had no idea that her story didn't start here, but long before, on the cold pavement outside the hospital where she first saw Helen. Months earlier, before a billionaire ever knew her name, Maya's days began and ended in the same exhausting cycle. Wake up in the dark, catch the crowded bus, change into fresh scrubs that never felt truly clean, step into the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital. She moved from bed to bed, patient to patient, with a practiced smile and gentle hands. She wasn't the fastest nurse or the most experienced, but she was the one who always stayed an extra minute to ask, "Are you really okay?" even when the chart said stable. Her paycheck barely covered rent for her tiny apartment and the monthly transfer she sent to her mother for medicine. Some nights, she skipped dinner, so her mother didn't have to. She pretended it didn't matter. At the end of her shift, when most staff hurried out of the hospital, Maya always slowed down as she neared the sliding glass doors. Just beyond them, on a worn-out bench near the parking lot, sat the same figure every day and every night. Thin woman wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing, holding a plastic bag and staring at the ground like she was listening to something no one else could hear. Other nurses called her that homeless woman. Security called her a problem. People avoided her, walking a little faster when they passed, eyes fixed on their phones. But the first time Maya really looked at her, she saw the tremor in her hands, the way her lips had turned pale, the harsh cough she tried to suppress. Maya saw a patient, not a problem. On that evening, instead of hurrying past, she walked toward the bench, clutching the extra sandwich she hadn't eaten during her shift. "Hi," Maya said softly, standing a respectful distance away. The woman looked up, eyes wary, as if expecting to be told to move along. "I'm not security," Maya added quickly, offering a small, nervous smile. "I'm a nurse. I brought you this, if that's okay." She held out the sandwich wrapped in paper. For a moment, the woman didn't move. Then she reached out with shaking hands, taking it carefully, like it might disappear if she made a sudden move. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice rough and tired. "My name's Maya," the nurse continued. "Do you need anything else? Water? Maybe I can get you some tea from the cafeteria." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Tea would be nice," she said. "I'm Helen." That night, Maya returned with tea in a cracked paper cup, a small container of soup, and a thin blanket she'd bought from a discount store months ago. It wasn't much, but it was warm. She sat with Helen for a few minutes, listening more than talking. Helen didn't share much at first, just small things. That the nights were colder lately. That it hurt when she breathed too hard. That people didn't usually talk to her. Over the next few days, it became part of Maya's unspoken routine. Before her shift, after her shift, during her short breaks, she would check on Helen. She cleaned an old cut on her hand, wrapped her blistered feet with fresh band, brought her leftover meals that other staff would have thrown away. When Helen coughed, Maya pressed her lips together, wishing she could do more, but knowing she couldn't admit to the hospital she was quietly treating someone outside their system. "You shouldn't get too involved," a coworker warned her one day. Maya only replied, "If I were out there, I'd want someone to get too involved." As weeks turned into months, the city grew colder, and so did Maya's struggles. Her landlord announced a rent increase with a shrug, as if it were a small inconvenience, and not a wave that could drown her. She started working extra shifts, coming home with aching feet and a buzzing mind that could never fully rest. Her mother's health worsened, and the cost of her medicine climbed higher. Some nights Maya stared at her bank app with a knot in her throat, doing silent math that never seemed to add up. Yet no matter how tired she was, she never stopped stopping by that bench. One particularly bitter evening, icy wind cut through her thin jacket as she left the hospital. She spotted Helen shivering under a soaked blanket, her lips blue and her cough harsher than ever. Without thinking, Maya pulled off her own coat and wrapped it around Helen's shoulders. "You'll freeze," Helen protested weakly. "I have layers," Maya lied, her teeth already chattering. "You don't." Helen looked at her with eyes full of something close to disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You're the only person who sees me," she added, voice breaking. Maya swallowed the emotion rising in her chest. "Because you deserve to be seen," she answered simply. In the hospital, whispers began. Some coworkers rolled their eyes when they saw Maya come in from outside with red, cold hands. "You should mind your own life," one of them told her in the locker room. "You can't save everyone." Maya tied her hair back, avoiding the sting of the comment. "Maybe not everyone," she said softly, "but I can try to save at least one." She didn't know it yet, but each sacrificed every skipped meal. Every lost hour of sleep spent caring for Helen was slowly weaving a thread connecting her to a life far beyond her imagination. Then, one ordinary morning, everything changed. Maya finished a long night shift, her eyes heavy but her mind already thinking about checking on Helen before going home. She pushed through the glass doors, expecting to see that familiar hunched figure on the bench. But the bench was empty. The plastic bag, the blanket, the quiet presence that had become part of the hospital's landscape gone. A sharp fear ran through her. Maybe she moved to a different spot, she told herself. Maybe security finally forced her away. Clutching her bag, Maya walked around the hospital grounds, scanning every corner near the parking garage, by the loading dock, along the side street where ambulances came and went. Nothing. No sign of Helen's thin frame or her soft, grateful smile. The wind seemed louder without Helen there. Over the next few days, Maya asked around. "Have you seen the woman who usually sits on the bench outside?" she asked the security guard. "Haven't seen her," he said dismissively. Maybe she finally moved on. The idea of Helen just moving on didn't comfort her. She checked the emergency room records when she could, searching for an unnamed woman who might have been brought in overnight. She called a couple of shelters on her break, describing Helen's appearance as best she could, but they had no one by that description. The not knowing ate at her. At home, she lay awake in the dark, imagining the worst, Helen shivering under a bridge, too weak to call for help, or worse, lying somewhere alone where no one would ever know her name. Guilt wrapped around her like a second blanket. Had she done enough? Should she have insisted on checking Helen into the hospital? Should she have called someone sooner? Maya whispered a quiet apology into the night, though she had no idea if Helen would ever hear it. Days turned into weeks, and life went on, at least on the surface. Patients still needed medicine. Charts still needed updating. Alarms still beeped with urgent demands. But for Maya, something was missing from the rhythm of her days, the quiet certainty that, no matter how hard the shift had been, Helen would be waiting on that bench, alive. A little bit safer because Maya had been there. She threw herself into her work, maybe to distract herself, maybe to fill the hollow place where worry lived. One afternoon, just as she was about to start another shift, a fellow nurse called her name. "Maya, someone's looking for you," she said, nodding toward the reception area. "He said it's important." Confused, Maya walked down the corridor, smoothing her hair back and adjusting her name tag. Waiting there was a man in an expensive-looking coat, holding a folder and talking quietly to the receptionist. He looked out of place among the hospital's crowded chairs and outdated posters. As she approached, he turned toward her with a polite smile. "You must be Maya," he said. "I've been trying to reach you." Her eyebrows knitted. "Do I know you?" He shook his head. "Not yet, but I know about you. Could we speak somewhere private?" Suspicion flickered through her mind. Scams, sales pitches, something she didn't have time for. But there was something in his tone, honest, respectful, that made her nod. In a small consultation room, the man opened the folder and laid it on the table. Inside were photos, grainy security images from outside the hospital. In each one, Maya saw herself handing a sandwich to Helen, wrapping a coat around her, kneeling with bandages in her hand. Her heart pounded as she looked up at the stranger. "Who are you?" she asked slowly. "And why do you have these?" "My name is Daniel," he replied, "and I work for the Hawley Foundation." The name sounded familiar again, like an echo she couldn't place. Daniel continued, "We've been searching for a missing family member of our founder, Richard Hawley, for years. A woman who disappeared from the public eye after facing very difficult times." He slid one more photo from the folder, this one clearer. A close-up of Helen sitting on the hospital bench, eyes downcast, hands clutched together. "This is her," he said gently. "Her name is Helen Hawley." The world seemed to tilt. Helen, the homeless woman who apologized when she coughed too loud. The woman who thanked her for every cup of tea, like it was gold. The woman who called herself forgotten. A Hawley? Part of a billionaire family? We received a call from someone who thought they might have seen her near this hospital. Danielle went on. By the time our team arrived, she was already very sick. She was taken to a private medical facility for treatment. She's safe now. Relief flooded through Maya so strongly her knees felt weak. Helen was alive. Safe. being treated, that alone might have been enough. But Daniel wasn't finished. He tapped one of the security images showing Maya carefully wrapping a scarf around Helen's neck. When Helen was stabilized, he explained, she told us about a nurse, a poor nurse who took care of her every day when the world pretended she didn't exist. He looked at Maya with quiet admiration. She didn't remember your name, but the hospital staff did. They said, "Oh, you must mean Maya." We reviewed footage only to confirm what she told us. Maya stared at the images, embarrassment and confusion twisting inside her. "I wasn't doing anything special," she murmured, eyes burning. "I just didn't want her to be alone." Daniel gave a small, knowing smile. To some people, that's everything. Later that day, Daniel led Maya through a different part of the city, one she had never walked through before. The streets grew cleaner, the buildings taller, the windows wider and shinier. Finally, they reached a private medical facility with glass walls and polished floors that reflected their steps. "She's here," Daniel said quietly. Inside, everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and luxury flowers on every table. Soft music in the background, nurses in pristine uniforms. It felt like the opposite world of the crowded public hospital where Maya worked. He guided her to a door and paused. "She's been asking if we've found you," he added. "I think she'll be very happy to see you." With a deep breath, Maya stepped inside. The room was bright and warm, sunlight streaming in through large windows. On the bed lay Helen, propped up by pillows, wearing clean clothes and a soft cardigan. Her hair, once tangled and wild, had been brushed neatly, and her face no longer looked hollow, just tired but peacefully so. "Helen," Maya whispered. Helen turned toward the voice, and her eyes widened. "Maya," she breathed, disbelief melting into joy. Tears welled in her eyes as she lifted a trembling hand. Maya rushed to her side, gently taking her fingers, feeling the warmth there. "You're okay," Maya said, her voice cracking. "I was so worried when I couldn't find you." Helen squeezed her hand. "I wanted to tell you," she said, "but everything happened so fast. They took me to a hospital, real treatment, real doctors. They told me my brother had been looking for me all this time." She glanced toward the doorway, where a man had appeared tall, composed, watching the reunion with emotion he was trying to control. "Maya," Helen said softly, "this is my brother, Richard. The billionaire everyone read about. The man whose donations funded hospitals and schools. The man who, unbeknownst to Maya, had already heard her name." Richard stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Maya. He extended his hand, and she shook it hesitantly, feeling completely out of place in her plain scrubs. "Thank you," he said, voice low but steady. "Those words feel too small, but they're all I have for now. Thank you for keeping my sister alive." Maya shook her head quickly. "I didn't do that much," she insisted. "I just brought her food, checked on her when I could. Anyone would have done the same." Richard smiled sadly. "I'm afraid that's not true," he replied. "Most people didn't. You did." Repeatedly, he pulled a chair closer and sat beside Helen's bed, looking at his sister with visible tenderness. "When we found her," he continued, turning back to Maya, "she could barely speak, but she made one thing very clear. There was a nurse who treated her with dignity when she had nothing. A nurse who gave her warmth when the world turned cold." Helen nodded weakly, tears on her cheeks. "You were the only one who looked at me," she whispered. "Not through me." Over the following days, they spoke more. Richard learned about Maya's life, how she sent money to her mother, how she lived simply, how she still believed she had didn't. He learned about the Coachy D given away in winter, and the nights she spent outside her shift just to make sure Helen was breathing. Each detail tightened something in his chest. He was a man used to solving problems with donations, board meetings, and large checks. But this was different. Kindness like hers couldn't be bought or ordered. It came from a place of quiet courage, which is why early one morning he found himself standing at her worn apartment door with 2 security guards and a sealed envelope in his pocket, ready to change the life of the woman who had unknowingly saved his sister. Maya never expected her life to shift in the span of a single morning. She stood at her doorway, clutching the gold-sealed envelope, unsure whether to open it or hide it away like something too precious for her hands. Richard watched her with a soft patience, the kind reserved for moments that change people forever. "Go on," he encouraged gently. With a shaky breath, Maya broke the seal. Inside was a letter written in elegant handwriting. Helen's handwriting. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a life reclaimed, I am alive because you believed I was worth saving. Folded behind the letter were documents she couldn't understand at first, a deed to a small but beautiful apartment near the medical district, a scholarship certificate for advanced nursing training, and an offer letter from the Hole Foundation inviting her to join a new outreach program for underserved communities. Her breath caught. I can't accept all this, she murmured, overwhelmed. But Richard stepped closer, his voice firm, yet full of gratitude. You gave without expecting anything. Let this be our way of honoring what you've done, not payment recognition. Tears blurred her vision as she looked from the papers to the billionaire who had once been a stranger. For so long, she had lived believing her kindness didn't matter, that her efforts were too small to change anything. Yet here she stood, proof that even the quietest acts ripple outward in ways no one can predict. Later that afternoon, she visited Helen in the recovery center. They sat together by a sunny window, sipping warm tea the way they used to outside the hospital. Helen's smile was fuller now, her eyes clearer, her voice steady. You saved me, she said softly. Maya shook her head, smiling through tears. No, Helen. You just needed someone to stand with you until you could stand again. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with gold and soft pink, Maya walked outside and felt a strange, beautiful warmth in her chest, not the exhaustion she was used to, but hope, real and steady. The world hadn't changed overnight, but hers had. She had a home now, a new purpose, a friend she once thought lost, and the knowledge that kindness had brought her here step by step, choice by choice, moment by moment. She looked up at the fading light and breathed in deeply, letting it settle into her bones. In the quiet of that evening, a single truth echoed clearly in her heart. When you give from the little you have, life finds a way to return it in ways you never expect. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life your own or someone else's, simply choosing to care.